Welcome back to Flagstone Trail, our deep dive into Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. We're getting into some really interesting laws now, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this one.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit of a head-scratcher.
It is. It's definitely one of the more counterintuitive laws in the book, but incredibly powerful when applied strategically.
Especially in the workplace, I would think.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so let's not keep anyone in suspense any longer. Law 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor. Now, I know what you might be thinking.
Right.
Isn't being present and visible key to gaining influence?
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But Greene is arguing that sometimes the opposite is true.
Okay.
Making yourself less available can actually increase your value and respect.
Interesting.
It's about creating a sense of scarcity.
Right, because we tend to value things that are rare or hard to come by.
Exactly.
It's like that old saying, familiarity breeds contempt, or maybe not contempt, but definitely a decrease in fascination.
Yeah, exactly. Greene illustrates this principle with a rather colorful anecdote about a medieval troubadour named Sir Guillaume de Balaun.
Oh, I love a good historical anecdote. Let's hear it.
So Guillaume was madly in love with this lady, Guillelma de Balaun. Initially, he was completely smitten, showering her with attention poems, the works.
So far, so good. Classic romance.
Right. But then a friend tells him about this joy of reconciliation after a lover's quarrel. So Guillaume decides to try a little experiment.
Okay.
He feigns anger and withdraws from Guillelma, figuring she'll pine for him and they'll have this passionate reunion.
I see where this is going.
Yeah, but here's the twist. His absence has the opposite effect.
Okay.
Instead of missing him, Guillelma becomes even more infatuated.
Oh, wow.
She pursues him relentlessly, which actually starts to make Guillaume uncomfortable.
Really?
Yeah, her constant presence starts to suffocate his feelings. It was only when she finally backed off that he began to regain his romantic interest.
So absence made her heart grow fonder, but not his. It's almost like the power dynamic flipped.
Precisely. And that's a key takeaway for us even in today's world.
Okay.
Sometimes giving people space, especially in the workplace, can make you more attractive, more sought after.
Interesting.
It creates an air of mystery, a sense that you're not so easily accessible.
It's funny how these ancient stories can still be so relevant to our modern lives.
Right?
I'm still a little fuzzy on how this strategic absence plays out in a more practical, real-world scenario.
Let's look at another example Greene uses. The story of Deioces, an ambitious man in ancient Medea.
Okay.
So picture this. Medea is in chaos, no strong leadership. Deioces sees his chance. He becomes known for his fairness and wisdom, basically setting himself up as this go-to judge.
Smart move. He's establishing himself as a valuable resource.
Exactly, but then at the peak of his popularity, he pulls a total power move.
What does he do?
He steps back, saying he needs to focus on personal matters.
He just walks away? I wouldn't have the guts to try that.
But that's precisely what makes it so brilliant. Medea falls apart without him. The people beg him to be their king.
Oh, wow.
And he agrees, but here's the kicker. He sets up all these rules to limit his visibility and access.
I see what he's doing. By making himself less available, he actually increases his authority.
Exactly.
People can't just walk in and demand his time.
Right. His decisions carry more weight because they're not commonplace.
Yeah.
He's not overexposed. So think about it. How can you create that sense of scarcity in your own work life? Maybe it's being more selective about which meetings you attend or setting boundaries around your availability.
That's a great point. It's not about being aloof or unavailable. It's about being strategic and valuing your time.
And that, in turn, makes others value your time as well. It's not just about external perceptions either.
Oh.
Strategic absence can actually have a positive impact on your own well-being, too.
Okay, how so?
When you're constantly bombarded with demands and expectations, it's so easy to get burned out, right? Strategic withdrawal gives you the mental and emotional space you need to kind of recharge.
So it's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly.
Stepping away from all the noise so you can come back with a fresh perspective.
Exactly. And that renewed clarity, it'd be incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
It allows you to see things more objectively and make decisions from a place of strength.
Instead of just reacting to every email and meeting request.
Right. Instead of just reacting to everything that comes your way.
Yeah.
You can be more deliberate about how you're spending your time and energy.
This is making me think about how often I check my phone.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly feeling this pressure to be on.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
It really is. And often that constant connectivity actually hinders our productivity. When we're always plugged in, we're more likely to make impulsive decisions, miss important details, just generally feel frazzled.
So if we want to be more strategic about our absence, How do we know when to pull back?
Yeah.
What are some signs that we might be being too available?
There are a few red flags to watch out for. Feeling drained and resentful.
Okay.
Having trouble focusing, making careless mistakes, noticing a dip in the quality of your work. Those are all signs that it might be time to take a step back and reassess.
Okay, those are some pretty clear indicators.
Yeah.
It's time for a break.
And remember, strategic withdrawal doesn't have to be this grand gesture like quitting your job and moving to a monastery or something.
Right.
It can be as simple as taking a few hours a day to disconnect from technology,
Okay.
declining a few meeting invitations, delegating some tasks to free up your mental bandwidth.
So small steps can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
It's about being intentional, even with those small moments of absence.
Exactly. And, I've seen this play out time and again in the workplace. Those leaders who are most effective aren't always the ones who are constantly present.
Interesting.
They're the ones who know when to step back, delegate, trust their teams to handle things. And then when they do show up,
Right.
it's with purpose and intention, and people really pay attention.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
It goes back to that idea of scarcity.
exactly.
You're not always available.
Yeah.
So when you are, people value your time and insights more.
Mm-hmm.
But is there a risk of taking this too far? Could you end up losing influence or being perceived as lazy or disengaged?
That's where the strategic part comes in.
Right.
It's about finding the right balance. If you withdraw too abruptly or without communicating clearly, it can definitely create misunderstandings.
So if you're going to be less available, you need to make sure people understand why
Yeah,
and that the work is still getting done.
exactly. You don't want to create a vacuum that breeds anxiety or resentment.
Right.
Set clear expectations, communicate your intentions, delegate effectively, maintain regular check-ins, even if they're less frequent.
It's like you're saying, I'm not disappearing. I'm just being more intentional with my time and energy.
Exactly. And that intentionality is what makes all the difference.
Right.
Strategic absence is not an excuse to slack off. It's an opportunity to sharpen your focus, refine your strategies, recharge, so you can come back even stronger.
Listening to you, it strikes me that strategic absence is as much about self-care as it is about power dynamics. It's about taking control of your own narrative, ensuring that you're perceived in the way you want to be perceived,
Yeah.
but also protecting your own energy and well-being.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
It's about being the author of your own story rather than letting circumstances or the demands of others dictate your actions.
Yeah.
And when you approach it from that perspective,
Right.
it becomes less about manipulation and more about empowerment.
I love that. Okay, so I'm already feeling inspired to be a bit more deliberate with my time and presence. But I have to admit there's a part of me that still wonders, how do you navigate this in a work culture that often rewards being always on?
That's a great question and a valid concern, especially in today's, hyper-connected world.
Right.
It's true that many workplaces have this culture of busyness and responsiveness.
Yeah.
But I think even in those environments, you can still find ways to create strategic absence without jeopardizing your career.
Do you have any tips for how to do that?
Sure. First, be observant.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to the unwritten rules and expectations in your workplace. Who are the people who seem to have mastered the art of strategic absence? What are they doing differently?
So it's about understanding the nuances of your specific work environment.
Exactly. And then start small.
Okay.
You don't have to make drastic changes overnight. Maybe it's blocking out a certain time in your calendar each day for focused work where you turn off notifications and really concentrate on the task at hand.
Okay.
Or perhaps it's being more selective about the meetings you attend, making sure you're only attending the ones where your input is truly essential.
Those are great practical tips.
And remember, communication is key. Let your team and your manager know that you're experimenting with different ways to be more productive.
Right.
And that you might not always be immediately available, but that you'll always get back to them within a reasonable time frame.
So it's not about being evasive. It's about being proactive and setting clear expectations.
Exactly. And over time, as people see that you're still delivering high quality work,
Right.
and that you're more focused and effective when you do engage, they'll start to respect your boundaries and your approach.
It sounds like it's a process, a shift in mindset, not just a set of tactics.
You're absolutely right. It's about changing your relationship with time and presence, both for your own well-being and for your professional impact.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, the art of knowing when to retire. This seems particularly relevant to Law 16, especially in a culture that often equates productivity with worth.
You've hit on a really important point.
Yeah.
We live in a society that often glorifies the never give up attitude.
The hustle culture.
Yeah, the hustle culture, the relentless pursuit of achievement. But there's a real wisdom in recognizing when it's time to step back, to let go.
Yeah.
To allow space for new ideas and new leaders to emerge.
It's like that saying, leave the party while they still want you there.
Exactly. And as difficult as it might be to let go of power and influence, there's a certain beauty and dignity in a graceful exit. It allows you to preserve your legacy and avoid the bitterness that can come with clinging to something you've outgrown.
I'm thinking about those leaders who refuse to step down even when it's clear they're no longer effectively serving the organization.
It's often a sad spectacle, isn't it?
Yeah.
It speaks to a fear of irrelevance, a resistance to the natural flow of change. But when a leader has the wisdom and the humility to step aside gracefully, it can be incredibly inspiring.
It shows a deep understanding of the cyclical nature of power, a willingness to make space for new possibilities.
And often it allows them to transition into a new role, perhaps as a mentor or advisor, where their experience and wisdom can still be incredibly valuable.
So it's not necessarily about ending your career, it's about evolving into a new chapter.
Yeah.
One that might be less visible, but no less impactful.
That's a beautiful way to frame it. It's about recognizing that power can take many forms, and that sometimes stepping back can be the most powerful move of all.
You know, as we've been discussing all this, I've been thinking about how relevant Law 16 is not just to our work lives, but also to our personal relationships.
I completely agree. In fact, I'd argue that it's even more crucial in our personal lives because the stakes are so much higher.
Right.
We're dealing with people we love and care about deeply, and the dynamics of power can be incredibly complex.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, we can easily fall into patterns of codependency or resentment, which can really damage our relationships.
Right. But if we apply the principles of strategic absence in a healthy way, it can actually strengthen our relationship.
How so? I'm a little hesitant to apply the concept of power dynamics to my personal relationships.
I understand your hesitation.
Yeah.
But think of it this way. It's about cultivating a healthy sense of independence within your relationships. It's about recognizing that you are a whole and complete individual, even within the context of a partnership.
So it's not about being emotionally detached. It's about having a strong sense of self.
Exactly. And that sense of self allows you to show up in your relationships with more confidence, authenticity, and generosity.
Yeah.
You're not clinging to your partner for validation or fulfillment.
Right.
You're coming to the relationship as a whole person.
Yeah.
Which ultimately makes the relationship stronger.
It's like that saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Exactly.
When we give ourselves and our partner space to breathe, to grow, to experience life outside of the relationship, it can actually deepen the bond between us.
Precisely. And it allows you to appreciate each other's presence even more when you do come back together. Think about it. Haven't you ever noticed that after a trip apart, you and your partner often feel more connected?
That's so true. That's like you've both had a chance to recharge and come back to the relationship with fresh eyes.
Right. And it's not just about physical distance. It's also about having separate hobbies, interests, even friend groups within a relationship. It's about maintaining a sense of individuality while still cherishing the connection you share.
So in a sense, strategic absence in our personal lives is about creating a dynamic of interdependence rather than codependence. It's about supporting each other's growth and evolution, both as individuals and as a couple.
Beautifully put. And it requires a willingness to let go of the need to control or possess your partner and to trust that the bond between you is strong enough to withstand periods of separation.
And that trust, I think, is ultimately what allows love to flourish.
I couldn't agree more.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It really challenges that idea that constant presence is the key to success.
Yeah.
Both professionally and personally.
It's a paradigm shift for sure.
It is. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Law 16, use absence to increase respect and honor. What's one key takeaway that you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
You know, I think the most important thing to remember is that strategic absence isn't about being aloof or manipulative.
Right.
It's about being intentional with your time and your energy.
Being in control.
Understanding the power of scarcity and ultimately taking control of your own narrative.
I love that. Being the author of your own story.
Exactly.
Both in the workplace and in your personal relationships.
Yes. And remember, it's a skill that takes practice.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to experiment, to start small, and to gradually integrate these principles into your life.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely. And as with any journey, the most important thing is to enjoy the ride.
Well said. And that's it for today's Flagstone Trail discussion. We appreciate your listenership.